So today we have Pro 2A candidate Alex Harlan.
Alex, you are aware that the cult 1911 did win 2 world wars.
Comfortably in the holster of officers.
I'm Dwayne Urban, and welcome to the Urban Defense Podcast, featuring discussion on firearms, concealed carry, self-defense, the law, and much more. Designed to inform, educate, and increase your survival in a critical incident, with your hosts, Dwayne Urban and Andrew Sauer. Welcome to the Urban Defense Podcast, and in today's episode, we'll be sitting down with candidate for Maryland House of Delegates, Alex Harlan. Alex, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So you're running for District 42A.
Yes, sir.
And what is District 42A?
So the best way I can describe it to people is, say my hand is the Carroll County line. And it starts, the bottom line is Shawan Road. And it cuts all the way across and then snakes over into Jacksonville, Long Green, Baldwin, Dulaney Valley area. That's like the southeast part of the district. And then it comes back up and it hugs the Carroll and Harford County lines all the way up to the Pennsylvania line. And it's everything in the north.
And Alex, whose seat is that currently?
So the current delegate is Nino Mangione.
And he's not running again?
No, so he's running for Baltimore County Council because the current Baltimore County Councilman, Wade Catch, isn't running again.
So, your district, it'd be Hereford. Give us a list of the major demographic locations.
So you have like Hereford, Parkton, again, Jacksonville, Long Green, Baldwin, Upperco, Whitehall, have the entire Pretty Boy Dam, and also part of like the Lock Riven Reservoir.
This is a unique district in that, not that it's the only one, but is a single member district.
Yes, sir.
While most of the districts have 3 representatives in the Maryland House of Delegates, you would be it, correct?
Yes, sir. So the 42nd district is interesting. So I guess like a little bit more of my background. Before doing this, I worked in the Maryland State Senate for State Senator Chris West. And so he represents all of the 42nd district. And so the reason they're single member is because it's divided up into, I guess, 3 different parts, where you have 42B, which is Delegate Michelle Guyton. She represents the kind of like Lutherville, Timonium area, and it's everything to the right side of York Road. And it goes down to the very bottom end, which is in like Ruxton, Towson area. Think of where Loyola Blakefield is, the Board of Education building, and then those neighborhoods kind of near Growls. So that's 42B. It's, I guess, more so, I guess kind of like leans blue now, but it could be possibly swingy. 42A is the district that I'm running for is primarily Republican because, you have North Baltimore County, which rural, a lot of farmland, a lot of agriculture, a lot of businesses out. Well, not a lot of businesses, but you've got farms, breweries, vineyards, other things like that. And then 42C is all Carroll County, and it encompasses Manchester, Hampstead, Finksburg. And so I guess they decided, there should be a Carroll County delegate for the Carroll County section of the 42nd district. And that delegate is Josh Stanko.
Alex, can you, maybe most people aren't familiar, can you explain what is your duties as a delegate?
So the duty as a delegate is to, as the way I see it, is constituent services, passing legislation, and just being a representative for the people in my community. And so part of the constituent services primarily revolves around when people are having an issue with the state, they should be able to call my office and say, hey, I'm having a problem with, state highway or something like this. And then, I guess for lack of a better term, using my position as an elected official to, I guess, work through the channels and say, hey, what's going on? Get on this.
So essentially, you get prioritized because you're an elected official and your voice will be heard quicker than the average citizen.
Which is really sad to say, but it is kind of the reality. Because I recall, when we would have constituent services in the office, at least on the Senate side, I say, hey, it's Alex Harlan with Senator West's office. And, the ears perk up and we kind of get things rolling a lot quicker.
And Senator West, has he made an endorsement in your race?
Yes, sir. So he has endorsed me, and so has Ellen Sauerbrey.
The wonderful ambassador. We love her to death.
So I know we're going to get into some of your goals and objectives, but a little bit about you as a person.
Sure.
From youth to now. Tell us about Alex Harlan.
Awesome. So I was born in Baltimore at Sinai Hospital, and our family lived in a townhouse off of Cold Spring Lane near Loyola University. And at about 3 years old, we decided to move to Baltimore County for educational purposes. My parents didn't want to, fork over the money for the private schools in Baltimore, and they thought, Baltimore City public schools would not be a quality education. So we moved into the Lutherville-Timonium area. So I went to Riderwood Elementary, Ridgely Middle, and Dulaney High School. And around 8th grade in Ridgely, that's where my journey into public service began. I got involved with this nonprofit organization called Athletes Serving Athletes. And what they do is they help kids with disabilities experience the thrill and competition of sports. We have these specialized strollers where we push them through races. We have bikes for them. We even have some people who I can only imagine how crazy good a shape they are. They will put these kids in a raft, strap the raft to themselves, swim them, bike them, and then run them even up into full Ironman triathlons. It's really cool because, I mean, you know, like they're saying is together we finish. And if you're like one of the volunteers, you're called like a wingman and things like that. And the athlete will always finish before you guys. You always push them over the finish line first. And that was really formative for me because I decided then, you know, I'm going to dedicate my life to being a public servant and giving back to other people and also just striving to be a part of something bigger than myself. So after middle school, went to Dulaney, and it was, you know, typical high school kid. I had an awesome group of friends. We had a band.
What was its name?
Aimless.
What kind of music?
So we ironically said we were hashtag not a beach band, even though it was kind of like beachy rock stuff. We actually do have a little EP on Spotify, so if you guys want to check that out, it's not good, but
Did you play sports at Dulaney?
yeah. So I ran cross country all 4 seasons, and then I did 2 seasons of JV lacrosse. I was a starting bench warmer, 2014 Baltimore County champions. But I think one of the more formative things, I guess, kind of segueing me out of sports was my sophomore year. I enrolled in a paramedical biology course at Dulaney. And it opened my eyes up to the world of emergency services. And so I decided my junior year to not try out for the varsity team, and I joined the Jacksonville Volunteer Fire Company. I've been there for over a decade now. I serve on the board of directors as the treasurer. I chair the membership committee, and I'm one of the top responders.
What's the best call you've ever been on?
I mean, no call is like the best because you are responding to, in some cases, the worst day of someone's life. I will say, I guess, some of like the more memorable ones, obviously, you're never going to forget your first fire. It was down near Warren Elementary School. I remember it was like summer of 2016, right before I was going off to college. It was miserably hot, and being in all that gear just exacerbated it. But because it was over in Cockeysville, we were like one of like the later due engines. We were RIT, which is like the rapid intervention team, which again, not as fun because, you're not the first one going in there and fighting the fire, but it's just as important because you're the crew that is standing by in case a firefighter goes down. So again, not as, appealing, not as cool, but world's more important. And then I guess like one of the crazier, more recent ones, we got dispatched to a house, or we've been there before, for a woman with she had mental health, substance abuse issues. But can't fault them for that. Everybody has their own struggles, but the issue is that her daughter, who had like power of attorney over her and things like that, would always try to get like a hold of her and things, but would never answer the phone, never come to the door, and she would always lock herself in her house.
So like a well-being check.
Yeah. And so it got to the point where, every time we would go there, we'd have to like force the door with like the Halligan bar and the axe, which sucks because, you have to break into someone's house. And so again, this happened, and we just thought, okay, whatever, this is routine. It's a frequent flyer of ours. But I guess this time we tried to go in to check her out, and she pulled a gun on one of the guys on our crew. And we basically had to pull him out of the window that had like shards of glass already on it still. So we're trying to bandage him up while we're leaving. And I guess, the cop that was already on scene saw the gun and screamed us like, get back, get back. And I turned around, she already had her gun drawn and was calling for backup. And I mean, to get from, Cranbrook Road up to Jacksonville in 7 minutes is, thank goodness they did, because they really saved us back there. It was awesome.
What wound up happening? They take her into custody, or?
Yeah, so they took
obviously.
They took her into custody. They were able to disarm her. And what makes it even more sad was that, so it was a revolver, and it was one live round and the rest were blanks. So she was probably playing Russian roulette with herself, if I had to speculate. And it really makes me feel, because again, everybody has their struggles, and I wish I guess I'm just like a softie. I wish I could always just like help everyone.
So tell me about college.
Yeah, so Yeah, after high school, graduated, I went to Penn State University and I got my bachelor's in political science. Although I make the joke that it was the best 3.5 years of my life because I was class of 2020. So I had the virtual graduation and all that, which it sucked. And, it's just horrible thinking about, I was robbed of my spring semester, my senior year. I was robbed of walking and, throwing my cap up in the air and having like, that final dinner with my friends in the house that I lived in and stuff like that. And so government overreach and lockdowns and things like that, they cut a little deeper for me. But I couldn't really focus on it too much because by then I had gotten into grad school. And so American University. And so, summer of 2020, I started my master's in counterterrorism and Homeland Security. And so I was doing that. It was a 2-year program. Summer of 2021, while I'm doing it, I had the opportunity. I got an internship with the Cato Institute in their Defense and Foreign Policy Department. And there were some really cool research projects that I got to work on.
For those of us who don't know what the Cato Institute is.
I was just getting ready to ask. What is that?
Tell us.
So the Cato Institute is a more libertarian-leaning think tank in D.C., and their principles are individual liberty, limited government, free markets, and peace. So I fit right in there like a puzzle piece.
Sounds horrible. Who would support those ideals?
Yeah, absolutely.
Disgusting.
Yeah. And the Defense and Foreign Policy Department was really interesting because I guess going into more of like an academic nerdy side of me, I'm of the realist paradigm of foreign policy, specifically with American foreign policy, national security, which essentially prioritizes that the United States should not be necessarily the world's policeman. The internal affairs of other countries are none of our business. And as long as we maintain open sea lanes and protect our interests, that should be fine.
We have a history of numerous successful interventions in the last 50
Absolutely.
years. I don't know what you're talking about, sir.
Oh, yeah, no. Those photos of, the Chinooks getting like the last people out of like a war zone that we've been in for like 20-some years. Yeah.
But I strongly agree with you, Alex. The rest of the world's problems should not be ours.
And that's not to say that we need to full on retreat into like Fortress America. There is times where we need to go out like on self-defense and things like that.
Self-defense, absolutely.
But we shouldn't be in the process of like, or the business of like nation building and things like that.
It always ends well. I don't know why you're against it, sir.
They always end up with a bunch of helicopters and weapons and everything else. So they win at the end.
We go over there, we leave all of our goodies behind.
Oh, yeah.
As a Boeing shareholder, this sounds wonderful. Well, we got to replenish them all before we donate them to the next country.
Yeah.
Usually our enemies.
Oh, well, it's cheaper to leave them is what they say.
From Lord
hard
of War.
to believe that.
Yeah.
From Lord of War.
Yeah.
I believe that was from Joe Biden.
Not Afghanistan.
Yes. It's cheaper to leave them there.
When they talk about divorcing your wife, they're like, it's cheaper to keep her. Well, when it comes to leaving our equipment behind, it's cheaper to leave it.
It just seems to me they could have just put some extra gas in those helicopters and flown them to a friendly country. I'm not a pilot. I don't know, but it just seems like quite the waste.
Honestly, at this point, and again, I'm pirating this from the Babylon Bee, if you guys are familiar with that, but we should just give, our adversaries and our allies just trebuchets, and they can just throw the bags of money back and forth between them.
Pretty much.
But so, there was a bunch of interesting projects that I got to work on. So one was Justin Logan's NATO Defense Burden Sharing Project, which is essentially a scholarly and academic way of what Trump has been saying for the last decade, which is NATO, pick up the slack and pay your fair share. So we were essentially graphing.
These countries don't have the money to do it, though. They have these social programs they need to fund, sir.
Yeah, tell that to my family from the Netherlands, who, whenever they have a very, important surgery or something that they need, they come to the U.S. But
I've heard socialized medicine is the best, sir.
I'm still waiting for all these celebrities to leave and go to the utopia of Cuba and these other places.
Yeah, except when they need a medical procedure, they will be back, I promise.
Oh, yeah. So I also got to analyze the fiscal year 2022 Department of Defense budgets.
Money well spent, sir.
I cannot make this up. When you look at the 2022 budget for U.S. Space Force, they have money in there for space cruisers. So,
but do they have money for Iraqi Sesame Street? Because I want to know.
Tell me more about the space cruisers. That's what I really want to know about.
So it was just like a line of like the request for their budget. And if we're on the verge of Halo, I'm not going to be too upset about it. That's pretty cool. I will say, shout out to the U.S. Coast Guard. They were the only department that asked for less money.
Way to go, Coast Guard.
Got to give the Coasties some credit for that. Then there was also, towards the end of my internship, there was, I started working with one of the visiting fellows, Dr. Sahar Khan, and she was working on Pakistani ontological security, which is basically a fancy way of saying how the government will support and fund these militant groups and associated with like ISI and things like that to maintain their political credibility.
Those of us who don't know what the ISI is, please share.
It's Pakistani intelligence, and
The Inter-Services Intelligence Agency.
But so those were really cool, but I think the more interesting thing was that we had daily seminars where we got to have I guess, relatively speaking, one-on-one time. It was virtual because of COVID and all that. But, seminars with the scholars about different political philosophies and things like that, whether it be from like healthcare to race relations to how taxes should work and how they should be used by the government and things like that. And I think it really solidified, again, individual liberty, limited government, free markets, peace, as just, I guess, kind of like the core foundation of my political beliefs. But yeah, so the internship ended in August of 2021, but I'm still kind of in the think tank field.
Did you wear a mask the entire time?
I did not, proudly. But yeah, so I'm still kind of in the think tank space. One of my grad school professors, he's now a associate at Towson University. So we kept in touch, and he's with a think tank called the Orion Policy Institute. And so he brought me on. I'm basically an ad hoc research associate, but primarily what I do is host panel discussions about, geopolitical topics and things like that. I had one last summer about the ascension of Sweden and Finland into NATO and how that's going to change European security. And the panel was awesome. So I had my old college professor, Dr. Robert Packer, who is just brilliant. I consider him like a great friend and a mentor. And he's one of those people, like he got his degree in business and then his PhD in political science. And he's one of those people where, you go into his office hours, the first thing he asks you is, have you seen what the markets have done today? And so he can kind of gauge what's happening politically and then make his investments accordingly. And then there was Dr. Gregory Gastol, who is a PhD at War Studies University in Warsaw, Poland, which I didn't even know there was a War Studies University, but that goes pretty hard. And then Brigadier General John Tykert, who is a retired F-22 fighter pilot. And he also worked with, I guess, like a defense attaché in Norway. So he was a wealth of information about how it's going to change up European security. And essentially what's going to happen is the Baltic Sea will be turned into a NATO lake. And that's going to be huge because one of the big concerns that we have with, I guess, if there was to hypothetically be a Russian offensive against Western Europe, is this thing called the Suwalski Gap, which is it's in Poland going up through like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and it's like a 40-mile plain where you can get multiple tank divisions through it. And basically the tactic would be you roll these tanks through and they take over Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania with like little resistance before the West can regroup. And they can develop what's called A2AD, access to area denial. And so when you try to get more resources in there, they could have missile batteries set up, which could deter that. So being able to have that early warning and having more resources available, especially because, Sweden actually has a pretty strong military industrial complex, and they also have the Gripen fighter, which is really cool. So we talked a little bit about that. And the other thing that is, I guess, physically small but strategically massive is the island of Gothenburg off of Sweden, because they could put an early warning radar system in there that would be able to enlighten us about like whether incoming missiles are happening or not. And then also the scary thing is that if Russia was able to have Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they could use that as a jumping off point to enter into Germany from the north. So having Finland and Sweden there as two, very strong democratic nations with a strong military presence does help a lot. The other one that I did was about the impacts of AI on terrorism, because my biggest fear is, some of these terrorist organizations have tech-savvy people who could probably develop a large language model and then use that large language model as a supplement to actual people for online recruitment. And we could just have a huge influx of homegrown extremists because of that. So, I'm not privy to a decent amount of the information because, again, I don't have like a security clearance or anything, but I do have colleagues and friends who work in that space. And the consensus is we are incredibly vulnerable, which is a scary thought to have, especially with like our critical infrastructure and things like that. And I was talking with one of them about, are you guys familiar with 0 Day?
Tell us what 0 Day is.
So it's just a 6-episode series on Netflix. And the whole premise is the U.S. is hit with a cyber attack that shuts down all critical infrastructure for a minute. And you're talking like train derailments, power plants going offline, like 3,000 people die. And
Can I still get on TikTok?
only, oh no, that, what was that? Was that Red Note where you had to like swear your allegiance to the Chinese or something like that?
So you're saying Andrew's NVIDIA stock could be responsible for the terrorist recruitment.
Or my NVIDIA stock could save us.
I mean, I guess also speaking of stocks, I mean, you guys also know about like the whole thing with like DeepSeek, like the huge panic and all that.
Yeah.
And everybody was freaking out. I was actually talking to, it was back during like session, and I would go to like the Planet Fitness like before work and all that. And it was some like finance bros who I guess like day traded or whatever talking about it. And I go, guys, the reason they were able to make it so cheaply is because they're probably not feeding it all the necessary information. I mean, if you download DeepSeek and ask it about Tiananmen Square.
Ask it about Taiwan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, DeepSeek fizzled out like a fart.
But
yeah.
it did give a buying opportunity for some of us for some NVIDIA.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely. I mean, for those like 72 hours that it was a hot topic, it definitely helped because I think it sank NVIDIA like 15 or 16% one day.
I want to say
ETFD.
I want to say that I guess it was the tariff NVIDIA, when the tariff news came out and everything took a dive. That was a hell of a buying opportunity there. But I want to say NVIDIA got down to like $88 or $87 a share for a period there. So all those pre-set up buys were dinging on my phone.
Well, yeah, I mean it's a good thing, but it's just a shame that NVIDIA still won't pay you a dividend.
They do pay a dividend. It's 1 or 2 cents per share. I'm sorry, no, it is 2 cents. They doubled it. It went from 1 cent to 2 cents.
Oh, wow.
But hey, Berkshire Hathaway doesn't pay a dividend. They believe they can do better with that money than we can, and I believe Warren Buffett when he says that.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Next time I see Jensen Huang, I will bring up the dividend.
Yeah,
Please
bring it
do.
up.
Tell them we need a higher dividend.
Big Mister, we need
Yeah.
a dividend.
So, Alex, with all this in mind here, it sounds like you got a lot going on. Let's talk about what do you think the biggest issues facing the 42nd are? 42nd A, to be specific.
So definitely the Piedmont Project, which for those of you who aren't familiar, the Maryland Piedmont Reliability Project is a glorified extension cord that is going to go from energy sources in Pennsylvania, cut through North Baltimore County into parts of Carroll County and Frederick County, and dump all of its energy into data centers in Northern Virginia.
May have seen signs protesting this.
The no eminent domain for corporate gain, and basically what it's talking about is it's going to cut right through people's private property, their land, businesses, homes are going to be affected. I mean, like massive power lines right next to people's houses.
And none of this power will result in cheaper rates for me,
No,
correct?
none of the energy going through these lines, no Marylander will see an electron of that. It is all going to the Microsoft data centers in Northern Virginia.
So where do you stand on this issue?
I am absolutely against it, and if I can find any way to kill it, I will. Whether that be raising the standards for certificate of public need or...
As a lawyer, I may know what that is. Tell the rest of our audience.
It's basically, you have to go to the Public Service Commission, I guess, like on an appeal, for lack of a better term, and basically appeal to them saying there is a public need for us to have this infrastructure, even though there really isn't. And also, I guess part of the issue too is that Governor Moore is threatening eminent domain on property owners that don't give access to the property for surveyors and things like that. And, you know, shout out to Jim DeWeese, the Carroll County Sheriff. He's saying, I'm not instructing my deputies to help these surveyors. And Maryland State Police has also come out and said, yeah, we're not going to enforce this. So, I mean, hopefully we can at least delay this to the point where it's like not worth their time, but I'm still very fearful that they're going to try to pull something. I guess also part of, another issue, obviously, I mean, this is not necessarily like related to Baltimore County specifically, but to the whole state of Maryland, is taxes. You know, this most recent budget, there were over 40 tax increases, 40 new taxes in the budget. And it's really going to start hitting Maryland families and business owners very hard. I mean, we have the IT services tax, which is 3% business to business. And I mean, every business now has an online component. So everybody's going to get hit by this. And also, I'm willing to make the argument that it's going to make the country less safe. And the reason I say that is because we have a lot of IT contractors because, you know, U.S. Cyber Command is in our backyard at Fort Meade. So I have a colleague of mine who contracts does cybersecurity, but he said that with this new tax, he's going to have to move his company to Virginia. And you guys have probably also seen the article that
Well, I thought Maryland was really trying to push under Governor Moore's leadership that we were going to be welcoming these new wonderful kinds of companies. And these were the kind of companies we really want to flesh out here in Maryland.
Then why is he taxing them?
Because he needs money.
Yep.
And the question is what happened to the surplus? Where did that money go?
So I think a lot of it is being wasted on the blueprint for education. And that's also another thing too, is that I didn't plan on making education one of my priorities on my platform. Not that it's not important. It's just, I'm not going to lie to you and say that I'm an expert on education, but I was able to talk with some educators, like when I've been door knocking and things like that. And one of the things that really surprised me was it's almost kind of like a very Democrat strategy of just throwing money at something and hoping for it to get better. And they have this like per pupil funding model where they think if every pupil or every student gets X amount of money thrown at them, they're just going to magically be well educated. And I don't think that's a solution. I think when it comes to education, it needs to be as localized as possible. And now this is somewhat anecdotal, but my mother, she's probably one of the most well-educated women that I know. She got her education from public schools in Southeast Kansas, like literally like Kansas State of Kansas, right there. Closest city was Joplin, Missouri. But it's because it was so small and they didn't have, state standards like standardized tests and all that. It was just the teachers had more leeway to look at the students and go, hey, you know what? You're really good with the sciences. You should try this out. Or, hey, maybe this really isn't for you. Maybe look into these things because this is more of your strong suit.
Throwing money at a bad idea doesn't make it a good idea.
Exactly.
I was listening to talk radio, I was like 2 days ago or something, and they were talking about this very topic, and they were talking about the per pupil cost. And I don't remember what it was, but it was like a high number. I don't know, it was like $30,000 or something like that. It was a high number. And it's just amazing to me. And for me, I'm a parent, and I send my son to a private school, and yet I still am taxed to pay for public education.
Why should you be taxed on something that you're not using?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I mean, again, we're making too much sense, and I'm talking about serving in government. So of course, making sense is just
Yeah,
don't be doing too much
don't,
of that.
don't
Yeah,
do too much of that.
You're not gonna be
I'll lose my
Yeah.
parking spot.
Yes,
You'll
yes.
definitely lose that.
No, but education is definitely a concern. So what are some of the other concerns that you have?
So my platform has 5 pillars, which is lower taxes, protect North Baltimore County, enhance public safety, restore Second Amendment rights, and practical energy solutions. And so for lower taxes, plain and simple, as a delegate for 42A, I'm never going to vote for a new tax. I'm never going to vote to raise taxes. I'm never going to support fee increases. And I'll never support an insolvent budget. And I also want to try to take a stab at repealing that IT services tax and also the delivery tax is tied to inflation, because that's going to affect everybody. Everybody, uses Amazon now. Everybody uses DoorDash or orders a pizza or something like that online. And
Explain this just so everyone understands this latest delivery tax.
Yeah. Basically, every time you order something and it gets delivered, there's going to be a tax on top of that. And that tax, the price of that tax is going to be tied to inflation.
And when's that go into effect?
June 1st of this year.
So it's kind of like what they're trying to do now is they always wanted to push these EV vehicles and stuff. And now the Maryland is figuring out that more people are driving these EVs and they're missing out on, millions of dollars in fuel tax. So now they're trying to propose charging people anywhere from $5.86 a year up to $136 a year to use the highways.
Yeah. Oh, and also speaking of highway stuff, so I remember one of the taxes that was debated in the budget, at least on the Senate floor, was with the tire tax, which is an additional $5 added on to like every new tire that you get. So an additional $20 every time you get your tires replaced.
It's $2 now, I think. It used to be like they called it a tire disposal fee. So I think it was $2 a tire, at least when I was working in the car industry. That's what it was. I don't know what it is now, but
So it's going to go to $5. And in a very rare instance, the Senate Republicans got an amendment passed on the floor. And it was so that tax money, the additional $5 per tire, was going to go towards state highway to fix the roads. But then the House amended that out so that all the money goes to the Transportation Trust Fund, which I guess red line or goes wherever.
Do you support the red line, Senator?
No.
anytime we have to keep raising taxes and figuring out new ways to extort money from, the citizens and the people of the country, I feel like it's just like it's a sign that something is severely wrong. Like somebody is mismanaging funds somewhere, someone is
Absolutely.
stealing. And then on top of it, we're reaching out to the federal government and getting tons of, hundreds of billions of dollars from them. So where is all this money going? We should be driving on gold-plated roads by now.
Smooth gold-plated roads.
It all goes to the general fund. And then also, I mean, I guess this is a crazy concept. Maybe we help the residents of Maryland and by providing services or helping, the financially struggling by taking less money out of their paycheck.
Yeah.
I know that's a crazy concept, but
Shame on you, sir.
I mean, that just makes too much sense.
Yeah.
Why not keep more money in a person's pocket?
Yeah.
Because they think they can do better with it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, they can't. Because
Well,
here's
we know that.
here's the problem. Here's the problem with my tax. Me personally paying federal, state tax, like there's zero transparency there. So whatever the 60, 70 grand that I pay to the federal government, where does it go and what did I get for it?
When you pay your taxes, it should be itemized.
Yeah.
They should show you what every single bit went to, and people would revolt.
And I want receipts. I want receipts too.
So I'm glad that you mentioned that. So one thing that I would also like to do when it comes to tax policy, if elected, and I know it's a moonshot, but I just have to try because, I mean, at the very least, it'll get the conversation going. And it goes back to, again, kind of like my Cato days when I spoke with, he's now, the late Vice President David Bose. He wrote an article back in 2015, I think it was called the 1040D, D for democracy. And he proposed that on your tax form, there should be an additional page, and it can be optional, but once you have calculated how much you owe in tax, you can decide what department your money goes to. And I know that people are going to say oh, well, how do we fund this department or fund that? And I think, if the people don't want that department, you shouldn't be funding it. And again, another crazy concept. I think the people of Maryland know what's better for the state than some bureaucratic analysts.
Well, yeah, it goes back to this. It's always so easy for someone to spend someone else's money.
Yeah.
Because you have zero skin in the game.
Exactly.
Well, and it's not money. They didn't earn it.
No.
It's to them, it's a never-ending stream. It's a faucet that they turn on, and when they need more water, they add more taxes to add more water.
And also the other thing too is that the amount of people that, so when I go door knocking for my campaign, I want to say, if I had to average it out, every fifth door where I am speaking with someone, they talk about how they're probably going to move and either go to, Florida or the South or somewhere else because they can't take the taxes anymore. And they said I can't afford to live here. It sounds so verbose, but I could really see, I'm not a betting man, but if I had to, at the rate that we're going, if these taxes keep happening, I could see in the next census, we lose an electoral vote because of just the population decrease. And I even have heard of ardent Democrats talking about leaving the state because of the tax burden.
So you brought up the Second Amendment. Tell us about your positions on that specifically.
So I'm an avid supporter of the Second Amendment, and I think that Maryland Democrats are doing a really good job of infringing on those rights. If elected, a couple things that I want to take a stab at. One, I want to try to bring back the sale of standard capacity magazines because people are just going over state lines and getting them and bringing them back anyway. So why not have the money spent here, especially if we're in a deficit?
We're losing tax revenue on top of things, sir?
Yeah.
Oh my. Well,
Who would have thought?
and you say a standard capacity magazine. We all know what that means, but what is that?
So in Maryland, there's a cap where you can only have a 10-round magazine, which is not the case with most firearms. ARs, they can take 30-round magazines and things like that, and that's a standard capacity magazine. That's not high capacity. That's what they're built to carry.
But most handguns ship with more than a 10-round capacity magazine, so the standard capacity is what it's made at the factory.
Exactly.
Many of these companies have been forced to make magazines of lesser capacity to pander to these states like Maryland.
Exactly.
So, high capacity, but it's the capacity that the manufacturer made for that particular gun.
Yeah.
But you also got to be careful stirring that pot because if they're well, wait a minute, people can wait. They found a loophole. They can go across state lines and bring that back. Well, we got to seal that loophole. The next thing you know, they're going to try and outlaw, owning a standard capacity magazine.
The outlaw magazines.
Yeah,
They're trying to do that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't remember where this came from, but I remember looking online and there was a lawmaker who was like, well, why do we even need to waste our time with this? Because once the magazine has been fired, it's useless.
Oh,
They thought that when you fired the magazine one time and all of the rounds had been expended, you had to throw it away.
is it a paper mache magazine?
Yeah.
It goes to the point that a lot of these lawmakers have no idea what they're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
It was like somebody asked Dianne Feinstein about a barrel shroud because she thought barrel shrouds made guns more dangerous, and they asked her what a barrel shroud was, and she had no idea.
May
no
she
idea.
rest in peace.
Well,
Man,
you're kinder than I am.
Well, at the same time, I prefer they not know what they're doing, because if they
No,
knew what they were doing, they would use that knowledge for evil.
That's a good point.
It allows
That's a
us
good point.
to exploit their silly laws.
and I guess also the other thing too is to be, for like lack of a better term, a gun control watchdog in Annapolis and really blow the whistle on whenever they're trying to infringe on our rights. I mean, one of my big hopes is, there's talk about Trump signing an executive order for nationwide constitutional carry. But I think as we saw, after the Bruin decision, as soon as that happened, Annapolis Democrats got straight to work trying to curb that. So I could definitely see another scenario like that happening. So, I mean, I know that every year some senator, some delegate will put in a bill to enshrine constitutional carry in the state. And I mean, it doesn't really go anywhere, but I'm of the persuasion that it's better to know than to not know. I would at least try that.
You would happily co-sponsor constitutional carry here in Maryland.
Happily co-sponsor constitutional carry, happily sponsor it.
Well, I believe it was Delegate Grammer, was it not, that proposed last session and the session before that?
Yes. Now, firearms-wise, what's your everyday carry?
The SIG P365 SAS,
Ah, very good.
What caliber?
9mm.
So, Andrew, it is not a 1911,
I'm sad to hear that. I'm sad
nor is it in 45.
this young man is turning his back on the weapon that won 2 world wars.
Comfortably in the holster of officers.
Good call. Good call, Alex.
And I guess I'm also the persuasion of shot placement will always trump caliber size.
Yes, indeed. That's what she said.
So your grandfather left you that watch, but he didn't leave you a 1911.
No, sir, but he actually, so he was in the Army and he did Arctic warfare. He qualified expert on the M1.
Ah,
And that was my first gun, was a used in the Battle of the Bulge M1 Garand. And it's my prized possession. I'm probably going to put in my will that this is an heirloom that is not to leave the family under any circumstances.
awesome. Awesome.
Does it
And-
actually still have the clips for it?
Oh, and I have, gosh, I want to say at least like 20. I went on Gunbroker and there was a guy out in Montana that was just selling like a whole case of them, all like bandoliered and everything. I'm like, yep.
How is the price of ammunition looking lately?
It's not looking great.
Yeah.
It's, when it spiked, it came down a little bit, but oftentimes, as you see, when things go up,
They don't ever come
they
back.
don't ever come all the way back down because people get used to paying that amount. And that just becomes the norm. And even reloading, and I know we're going to do a series later, another show we'll talk about reloading. But even with reloading, the components are expensive. Everything's expensive. Good luck finding primers. So it's, although I think they've become a little bit more available now. Yeah, it's not great.
So is it safe to say you have your concealed carry permit?
Yes, sir. Even though I wish that it was just constitutional carry, but I am a law-abiding citizen, so.
All of this does get to the point of there was that lovely proposal that the state police would have to publish in plain language a summary of the current applicable firearms laws, which was shot down in Annapolis. How would you feel about that, sir?
I mean, why would they do that? I mean, I guess I also take it from the approach of you don't have true freedom and true access to your rights unless you have access to all pertinent information. It's up to you to make those decisions, but you can't have true freedom unless you are given access to everything that's necessary.
It would just be so simple, I would think, although the Maryland laws aren't quite as...
There you go again,
Yeah.
being simple and making sense.
But a simple publication, a little pamphlet that talks about prohibited places. It talks about the Maryland pattern jury instructions. It talks about the do's and the don'ts and definitions of deadly force and non-deadly force. Simple things that would help aid some of these people that maybe unfortunately found themselves paying for a class that didn't go over those things. And now they have this gun, they have the certificate, they have their carry permit, and now what?
We've let them loose into the world
Yeah.
without the knowledge they need.
Yeah,
as
that's-
I've said, like a half-baked cake, many of these people are coming out of the oven and they're going out onto the street. And again, like you said, pro was it you said
Pro gun, anti-idiot.
pro gun, anti-idiot.
Amen.
I'm pro gun and pro responsibility.
Exactly.
Personal responsibility.
Alex, how old are you?
I'm 27 years old.
27, young man. Okay, so I'm 40, and I noticed on your website you talk about leading the next generation of Republicans. Would you care to elaborate on that?
Sure. And so I can't stress enough, next generation of Republicans, it isn't just a slogan of, look at me, I'm young. I think that a lot of people my age, regardless of political party, are disillusioned and turned off by politics and see it as a bunch of older people who don't relate to them deciding their future. And so one of my goals or hopes is that they can see me down in Annapolis and go, you know what? Maybe I do have a voice. Maybe I do have a seat at the table because here's someone that's around my age that's going to probably make decisions to better my future. And part of that also is, I'm part of Gen Z. We're one of the most conservative generations since World War II. But there's a huge difference between being conservative and being involved. And I hope that them seeing me down there, we can bring more conservatives into the fold and make sure that not only they become more conservative, but that they become the conservative movement to preserve our values long after we're gone. So my message to the millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha, with me in Annapolis, you have a seat at the table. To the baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, I'm your legacy.
Nothing is more disenchanting than when I see senators that are in their 80s trying to understand and discuss Bitcoin, the internet, Fensta accounts, and having no idea what any of this is, and then they're expected to legislate about them.
I mean, at that point, let your social media intern testify for you. I mean, come on. I think also, again, regardless of political party, there's some common ground issues that my generation can really, focus on, whether it be mental health or also technology. And I guess also going back to education, I think a lot of people are sick of this traditional, Industrial Revolution style system of education that they have, where it's almost like we're being trained to be factory workers as opposed to being like tech entrepreneurs and things like that. There was, it was in American Reboot by Will Hurd, where he emphasized that for public education, early education, we need to start emphasizing the use of computer science and technology because he says that if we don't, and it's kind of chilling to think about, it's like we're eventually going to be in a world of Chinese movies with English subtitles. And
horrific. Vinny can't read that much.
8th grade education over here.
But I mean, the thing that I think about is that why can't we revamp, public education? Because fact of the matter is I can't remember the last time I used algebra. And I mean, why not also market it as, when it comes to computer science, why not make that an elective language, along with, Spanish, French, Chinese, or I guess it's technically Mandarin. Why not Python or Java?
Well, I was watching a video, and it's a gentleman. His first name is Monish, and I cannot pronounce his last name, but they call him the Indian Warren Buffett. And this is a guy that followed Warren Buffett's investment strategies and became a multi-millionaire. And he was talking about this exact same topic. And he said, in schools, we're raising a bunch of workers, but we're not teaching people how to become truly successful. And they, like you said, algebra, right? I don't know the last time I've used algebra 2 or things like that in my day-to-day life, but we have people out there that don't know how to change a tire with college degrees.
Yeah.
We have people out there that don't understand the basics of investing. And they think that all you do, and of course, back in the day, grandparents, save your money, put it in the bank. So I can earn a portion of a possible portion of a percent in interest? It's crazy.
Yeah. But to follow up what Dwayne's saying, I strongly believe that those fundamentals of life should be taught at a young age in school. Instead of focusing on algebra and all these other crazy ways to reach a figure or reach a number, you should be teaching, students about finance, about credit, how to, loans, how to, leverage loans, interest rates, how to keep good credit, why it's important to have good credit, and more importantly, investing your way out of the slave labor work system.
Absolutely. And I think also a lot of it too is, you can tell that, the foundation is starting to crack on our public education system with the fact that, I saw it when I was there, that kids just don't care. They're not interested. They're bored with the classes. I mean, I can tell you, out of my entire time in, Baltimore County Public Schools, with all of like the reading assignments that we had for like English and things like that. I mean, okay, sorry, I didn't read all the books. There was only, I think the only book that there's two books that I read through and actually appreciated. One was Night by Elie Wiesel, the story about the Holocaust survivor and how he survived going through the camps. And the other one wasn't even English class. It was my military history class, and it was Band of Brothers.
Yeah.
And
great.
so, I mean, the military history teacher, Mr. Velton, he was awesome. And basically he had the rule was because, we had a section about World War II, and it's like, if you read, these chapters of Band of Brothers and everybody gets at least an 80% on the quiz, the next class will watch that episode. And again, like that goes back to, you need to motivate students like about something that they care about.
Basic understanding of leadership. So in leadership schools that I've been to, they constantly refer to Band of Brothers because it was a wonderful example of leadership at its core.
Yeah.
And these days, you're right. People, they don't care. They don't want to be there. Certainly in the public school system and possibly also in limited amounts in the private school system, you have some bad apples that are in there that disrupt the class, especially in the public school system where the teachers can't take action. And what do you do with these kids? You can only move them around so much. You can't expel them out of this. I mean, maybe they do. I don't know. But then those kids become a cancer in the system that then causes other kids to want to follow suit because they think it's cool, and everyone suffers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so the chief at my fire station, so his daughters are Baltimore County public school teachers. And it's
God bless them.
Yeah, truly. And I remember he was telling me a story about a year or two ago that if a kid decides to just run out of the class and just, mess around and do whatever they want, the teacher isn't allowed to stand up and go, "What are you doing? Get back in the class." They literally have to go, "Runner." And then I guess they have like a student wrangler.
Runner.
they literally go, "Runner."
They need to bring that substitute teacher from that Key and Peele episode.
Yeah.
This is insanity.
Yeah.
This is insanity.
And the thing, it goes
and
back to like the
kids,
no hands on like the students and things like that, unless I guess, for lack of a better term, don't quote me on this, but like a certified wrangler for students or something like that.
I acted up in high school one time. I got choke slammed. I mean, come on.
I remember my mom telling me the story about, she was, I guess she was goofing off in class. And I mean, she's always been tiny. I mean, she told me she didn't hit 100 pounds till college. Tiny, tiny woman. And her teacher one time just shoved her in a trash can.
That'll teach you.
It's I guess it's no real mystery why most of the educators that I've met in my time has been at like a happy hour. And they're like,
I feel terrible.
They're slugging wine. And
I feel terrible for them.
Yeah.
And because they'll the police and military, thank you for your service. No, thank you for your service. Because what they do and what they have to put up with, and I get it,
yeah.
the teachers union, that's a whole nother discussion for another episode, talking about how that has potentially a negative effect on the education system. But the stuff that they have to put up with their hands tied, and I get it, there are also bad teachers out there. Like there are people out there in any job that do, but that's probably the exception and not the rule. But their hands are tied.
Yeah.
And they're dealing with these kids that don't want to behave, they don't want to learn, and they're corrupting the rest of the kids. So then the question is, what's the answer? And there is no easy answer.
I mean, there is a potential answer. I don't think Andrew's going to like it. Everything
1911s.
Everything should not be a lawsuit.
Oh,
Yeah.
sir.
It boils down to the same reason that the crime is just out of control in mostly blue states and blue cities, is because when there is zero consequence, what do you have to lose?
And look, it comes down to the home too. Personal responsibility. Mm-hmm. The parents need to take a role in their children's education, in their children's lives, in the discipline of their children. And that's not happening in all cases. And so you have these kids that they're a product of their environment. They know what they've grown up in. That's just life for them. And they bring that into the school system. And again, they corrupt these kids.
Yeah. And also, I guess the other thing, kind of going back to, I guess not caring and realizing like, hey, what have I got to lose? And I think it also goes back. I mean, I know I keep circling back to just how our education system just doesn't really help them. I mean, how are you going to sit there? I mean, imagine being a teenager today and you're being told the same stuff that I was taught, which was, work hard, go to college, get like some degree, do the 9 to 5 or whatever. And then they pull out their phones at lunch or they go home and they see, someone literally just like dancing around like a moron. And, they're buying like Lamborghinis and stuff like that. Now, granted, a lot of that is probably fabricated just for like likes and shares and all that, but it's nonetheless disillusioning. And they think like they probably have to feel like I'm being lied to. And when you feel like you're being lied to, I mean, especially as a rebellious teenager full of piss and vinegar, you're going to overcorrect. You're going to rebel.
Well, yeah, it's social media. It has literally been the poison of this new generation,
Do
just
not get me
because like you said, it creates an unrealistic
Exactly.
expectation of reality.
Yeah.
And on top of it, most kids are too lazy to read. So what they'll do is they scroll these multiple platforms of social media. They read the very indoctrinating headline and they just say, they take it at that's face value. That's facts. I saw the headline, and they get angry about it. They get emotional about it. And then they go on to someone's post or whatever, and they want to argue because they feel like that reading 2 sentences of a headline, they are now fully educated on what's going on, and instead of peeling back the onion, doing their own research.
Well, and I guess also the other issue with that too is it also goes back to, how I said I didn't read all the books that I was assigned. Yeah, if you want people to start reading and being literate, you have to find some books that are actually interesting. And I mean, the fact of the matter is these kids are, they're issued laptops now. And the amount of books that are free and available online, there's no excuse to not find good books for these students.
They have freaking audio books now.
Yeah. I know that teachers are probably like hamstrung with, their budgets and like their resources and the fact that, class sizes have exploded. But, it's hard to, motivate students when you don't have, good resources for them.
Yeah, well, that and especially like with the public school platforms, they're overpopulated.
Yeah.
There's too many kids to one class. So when I was going to school, like I think the max we ever had was maybe 20 to 25 kids.
Oh, wow.
But not everyone learns the same.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess also kind of going back to that, I mean, huge proponent of school choice. I mean, I know that the teachers unions are against it as like an existential threat to the education system. But I mean, again, if there's some kid in Baltimore City and he has the means to and the willingness to get up extra early, take the highway to go up to Hereford High School because there are teachers there that can teach him in a way that he understands, the kid should be allowed to do it. And that's the thing that I don't understand with the teachers unions is they say they're against school choice, but at the end of the day, what I see is we have less students in bad schools. And that's just the simple calculus of it. Less students in bad schools. I don't know why they'd be opposed to that.
Well, because if you have less students, then you have a need for less teachers, which means they have less membership, which means they have less money. So maybe that's part of it.
The American Federation of Teachers disapproves of this podcast.
Good.
I'm sure there's a lot of people that disapprove of this podcast.
Good.
Yes, that's fine. That's fine.
Well, you know what? If, I get it, reality's harsh for a lot of people to swallow. So that's why they try and choose to just live in their little bubble. And they're like, yada, yada, yada. I'm not interested in that. I don't want to hear about it. Just like investing, there's a lot of people I ask, do you do any investing? I don't know enough about it. I don't. And I was that guy. Nobody in my family was ever wealthy or, my dad still works at a grocery store for like $45,000 a year and he's been there for 35 years. And, he's never invested a dime in his life. He was always the same way. Mattress money guy. Bank? No, he doesn't even want a bank. He's always like, oh, I just keep cash. I keep cash. And, trying to explain to him about, your cash, you lose 3 to 5% on it every year. That it's just sitting there. Like he would be totally lost on that subject. But like I was fortunate, and even though I didn't go to high school or I didn't have a formal college education or anything like that, I'm actually kind of grateful because I didn't go into any kind of student debt. But I was able to get a harsh dose of reality at a young age. And I was able to also surround myself by people who were smarter than me and people that had figured it out. But that was one of those times where you keep your mouth shut and you listen and you learn. And like they will tell you things, and once they start explaining things to you, and if you have good enough common sense, you can kind of pick up what they're putting down, and you're like, wow, that really makes sense. And once that clicks in your brain, and you can kind of set your mission.
You actually got a PhD in the School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah,
I think that's what you got.
Pretty much, yeah.
Also, just random. I mean, I'm going to recommend a song to you because I feel like it'd be applicable to your life. It's called "Life Lessons" by Wyatt Flores.
Okay, I'll
I
have to
think
check that out.
it'll be a T for you.
While we're talking about education, how do you feel, all of this tying into this question, how do you feel about vocational learning?
Oh, we should absolutely be pushing for it. I mean, so a perfect example, my buddy Elijah, the one who was just like perfect at everything and could just like shred on the guitar. So he went to UMBC for biomedical engineering, and it wasn't his thing, and he struggled with it, but he actually found a lot of happiness and is making a really good amount of money in the trades. And, you know, he's like now, I guess, like a project manager for Michael & Sons, like he's got the van and all that. And he's talked about like how it's liberating in a way. And I think what people also forget with like the trades, because they've just gone by the wayside, it's what's cool about it is that like no day is the same, and you really have to think, and it's like actually problem solving. It's like, and again, not to diss the people that, you know, are doing like desk jobs and things like that. I mean, look, I'm dressed like I'm in wealth management, and you know, there's nothing wrong with doing that if you do that.
Are you in wealth management?
I am not. I just dress like it.
Andrew, are you in wealth management?
I don't have a good answer for that, Dwayne.
You manage your own wealth.
Yeah, but I mean, there's something to be said for that, because you know, obviously, growing up, I had some very rough jobs. I mean, my first job ever, I think I was 14, and I was a busboy. And I worked for some Greeks, and they worked me like child labor laws. And hell no, I was working 7 days a week. But I had my first little taste of like financial freedom because I had money in my pocket. And I was like, wow, I can actually go buy myself like a pair of Nikes now. I can buy myself a cell phone. Like I bought a moped, and that was like my primary source of transportation. So I was hooked. You know, obviously I was like, wow. You know, but I've also done some really hard physical labor jobs. I was an auto mechanic. I was a motorcycle mechanic. I worked at a dealership for 11 years, and I learned a lot. There was guys there that had been doing it 30, 40 years. They were smart. And then we had kids that went to school for it, and they would come into like, you know, basically be an intern or entry-level mechanic, and they didn't know shit.
It's actually, some of my friends, you know, who are like in the military talk about how, you know, they're going to trust the sergeant over like the second lieutenant who just like came out of West Point or something like that, just because of the experience. And that was also, I guess, a really cool experience that I had. So summer before my senior year of college, I was I guess, mechanical systems intern for Martin J. Braun, but we were doing a pipe fitting project at NSA. And so that was a whole new dynamic where, you know, I got to, you know, I guess experience like the blue collar life a bit for the summer. I had to get up at like 3:30 every morning, be on the road by 4 to get down to Fort Meade. And they literally had a dog inspect my car every morning.
Yeah.
And basically got to the building where we were doing the pipe work and all that. But it's just such an interesting cast of characters that you meet with just crazy life stories, and also probably some of the funniest people you'll ever meet. And I don't think people also appreciate, I guess, like in the trades, like the creativity that you need to have.
So, Alex, what is the status of your campaign right now?
We are shake, rattle, and rolling. So pretty much the bulk of it is I door knock essentially every day at some point. So my strategy right now is weekdays 4:30 to 7, and then Saturdays I try to do 11 to 4 or 5 o'clock. Sundays I don't do any time afternoon because, you know, people are going to church and things like that. And it's really been an awesome experience just getting to meet the people in my district. You know, it's been surprisingly receptive. I've been invited into people's homes to have conversations with them. You know, I always make it a point to handwrite them a note and like follow up with them because I just really care that much. And some awesome advice that I was given by this guy, Finn Jacobs. He's a University of Maryland student, and he worked on Kim Klasik's campaign. And he told me, you know, about half an hour after you have a conversation with someone, they're probably going to forget your name. By the end of the week, they're going to throw away the business card that you gave them, but they're going to remember how you treated them. And I mean, that's like no issue to me because I just believe in, you know, caring for people and just being kind and all that. And I love interacting with people. I feed off of that energy.
How do people find out more about you?
So I do have a website at alexfordelegate.com. I also have a social media presence on Facebook and Instagram. The Facebook is just Alex Harlan. My Instagram is Alex Harlan 42A. Feel free to follow the Republic. Yeah.
How would someone support you financially if they wanted to?
Oh, that'd be awesome. So checks are payable to friends of Alex Harlan, or also on my website, there is a donation page from Anadot where you can use Apple Pay or anything like that.
Any upcoming events?
Yeah, so I'm still working out the details of it now, but it's going to be Saturday, June 21st at the satellite location of Inverness Brewery, Four Corners Crabs off of Jarrettsville Pike. And I'm trying to model it as a beer bash. So your ticket will hopefully come with like a complimentary beer. I'm probably going to get some souvenir cups that have like my logo on it, just for like something like for people to take home. It's probably just going to be a 2-hour event, either from 5 to 7 or 6 to 8. I'm still, working out the details with Sandy right now, but we're at least good to go for Saturday evening on the 21st of June. Thank you guys so much for having me. This has been an awesome opportunity. Going back to what you said about like the trades and all that, this isn't really like about the campaign or anything like that. Just, if you're a young kid out there and kind of on the fence about college, there's money to be made in the trades. You don't have to go into debt. Like, seriously consider it.
Well, Alex, I greatly appreciate you coming on the program and talking about your campaign and telling us all about yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
We look forward to having you back very soon.
Likewise.
So for the Urban Defense Podcast, remember, comment, like, share, and subscribe. And remember, knowledge is mental ammunition. Train, fight, and win.